Here we go. Now we have some audio. It is good to have you back today as we are beginning another week of Bible study here in the book of Nehemiah. If you would like to join us in this study, feel free to visit that URL right there at the bottom of your screen, go.christtable.today/reconstruct. You can find all of the information there on this study and the reading plan and how you can be a part of it all. Today we find ourselves really pretty much now in the middle of everything that's going on here in Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. So let's dig in. As we come to this point, we may be in the middle of the book, but we are essentially now at the end of the construction of the wall, just nearly, because all of the work has been done and all of the work has been put in, but the story is going to continue because the story isn't just about the building of the wall. The story is really about everything that is happening around the building of the wall. As we've said in the book of Nehemiah, the wall is the main character, not Nehemiah, and the wall was never supposed to be rebuilt in the mind of God, at least for the reasons that Nehemiah, and those who had returned from exile in captivity in Babylonia and then Persia, as far as the reasons for they were concerned for building the wall, was not what God wanted for his people. They were building the wall in order to keep people out, and God had said after the captivity, he wanted everyone to be able to be let in so that they could worship, learn, and follow him. And so that's where we find ourselves in the text. After a bit of an interlude, now we're going to return back to the wall in chapter 6. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our, notice this word that's used here, enemies, found out that I had finished rebuilding the wall and that no gaps remained, though we had not yet set up the doors in the gates. Now, there has been friction between Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the surrounding people of the people of Jerusalem, those who surrounded that area who were from other tribes and other backgrounds. There has been this disagreement from the very beginning of the book because none of them wanted this wall to be built. Now, they are all under Persian rule, and so it's a bit of an interesting friction here between. But what we've seen in this pattern is every time there seems to be something good or some progress that's made, there is an equal and opposite resistance that comes up. Where you stand on whether or not the wall should exist or shouldn't exist really puts you in the position of determining who's in the right and who's in the wrong here. Now, Sanballat, Tobiah, these are governors of the areas surrounding Jerusalem. Nehemiah is governor of the area of Jerusalem. And so these are his peers. And it's interesting that Nehemiah, and we should take note of this, I think, it's interesting that Nehemiah refers here to his peers as enemies. Not as peers, not as fellow governors, but uses a loaded term, a charged term. Enemies. So Sanballat and Geshem send a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But I realized they were plotting to harm me. Now, we're not sure how he realized that they were plotting to harm him. We're not even sure that there was any truth to the reality that they were planning to harm him. It seems as though this is just something that was conjured in his mind. Now, it may have been true that they were plotting to harm him. It may have just been his fear that was causing him to think that they were plotting to harm him. But we have no indication, really, other than Nehemiah's fears, that there was any intent to harm, though we do know that they disagreed with the building and the existence of the wall. So Nehemiah replies after the invite to meet them in the valley of Ono by sending this message back to them. I'm engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? Nehemiah essentially says, I'm busy. I can't come. I have other things to do. Now, we've all used this excuse, right, to get out of things that we didn't want to do, but we didn't want to say why we didn't want to do or why we didn't want to participate. So we just say, I can't. I'm unavailable. My schedule will not allow it. I mean, is this true? Technically, I suppose it is. He is engaged in a great work, but he can't come. I mean, he's not the one, at least by any indication that we have, who's physically wielding the hammer. He's a job foreman. He's a supervisor. And at this point, we've already been told that the wall is complete. All that is left to be done is to hang the gates of the wall. And so I call bull on this. Whether or not it was right for him to be dishonest or at least shade the truth, I think is left up to our conjecture as to where the right is in the story and who is right, and where the wrong is in the story and who is wrong. But I think foundationally what we see here is that there is zero trust here between these other governors and Nehemiah. And it seems, if we remember back through the last 5 chapters that we've come through in the book of Nehemiah, that there has never been trust here between any of them. And where there is no trust, there's no truth. It may well be that the area governors did indeed mean harm to Nehemiah and were being dishonest. It may well be that Nehemiah was not being honest about what their intents were and was just jumping to conclusions. It may well be that Nehemiah was playing fast and loose with what God wanted and knew it. The reality is that whenever we see these 3 groups or parties, God, the area governors, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Nehemiah, there really is no trust in any of these relationships. And we've seen that from all sides. We've seen that Nehemiah does not seem to trust God, because he continually says that God is in control and God's protecting this and nothing can stop it. But Nehemiah is doing everything in his power to make sure that that doesn't happen, because I don't think he has faith or trust that God is really fully, truly behind this in the way that Nehemiah says it is. And certainly over here with Tobiah and Sanballat and these governors, there is no trust in either direction in this relationship here. And where there is no trust, there is not going to be any truth. Sanballat and Tobiah, we can't trust that they're telling the truth, because we don't, as a third party reader, have any information that leads us to trust them. Nehemiah has proven that he is not being honest with the truth about what the governors say and do, or what God has said and asked him to do. And so we don't have a level of trust in Nehemiah either. And so there's little truth. We see this in our day, in our relationships, in our dealings in faith communities as well. Whenever there is no trust, there is no truth. Those things go hand in hand. We cannot trust that somebody's telling the truth if we don't trust them. And oftentimes, if somebody is not trustworthy, they're not telling the truth. And if we're not telling the truth, we can't be trusted either. So these things go hand in hand. You can't foundationally have one really without the other. If you're not being truthful, you're not trustworthy. And if you're not trustworthy, it's because you're not truthful. 4 times Sanballat and the area governors send the same message, and each time Nehemiah gave him the same reply. To me, this means they really wanted to meet and talk. I don't know that anyone who is probably wishing harm is going to extend this 5 times now to Nehemiah to come and talk and work this out. if they truly wished him harm, they would have, after the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time, really just come and harmed him, or just stopped asking, knowing he wasn't going to come. To me, this is a strong indication that what they said is what is true. There would be no reason for them to try 5 times to get Nehemiah to come if they were planning on harming him. Well, if he responded the first time and said, "I know what your plan is to harm me." Well, he gives up. Why try that route again? He's not going to change his mind. But maybe if that's not what we really intend, maybe if what we really intend isn't to harm him, but to really come to some sort of a peace or a compromise, let's just keep asking, and maybe we can convince him. Doesn't work. The 5th time, Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand. An open letter. Anytime an open letter is written, it's not written to the person who the "to" is. Dear Nehemiah, in an open letter, that letter is not to Nehemiah. That letter is to everybody else but Nehemiah. There is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me that it is true that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. There's a lot of insight here, I think, as to what's going on. I think they are being honest. I think they're being truthful as to what they have heard and what they believe, and they want to be convinced that the story is wrong, because everything that Nehemiah has done up until this point has essentially indicated to outsiders and probably to insiders that this is what the goal is. The goal is to rule over this area. Why would you build a wall that was unnecessary, both in the eyes of God and in the eyes of a peaceful kingdom that is being ruled by Persia? None of it makes sense. And so I think that this is what they've been told and what they are believing is true. We don't know whether it's true or not, but we'll assume for the sake of argument that it actually was a rumor and that it wasn't true. So he also reports that you have appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you, "Look, there is a king in Judah." You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king, so I suggest that you come and talk it over with me. And so they are kind of, in a way, calling Nehemiah's bluff, saying, if this isn't true, then you need to let us know that this isn't true, because we're going to alert the king that it's true, because we have no other information to discount it. So we must send this information up the chain to the authorities, because if not, we may be held liable for knowing what you were doing and not telling. So this is a medium step, a middle road between ignoring it and going straight and tattletelling to the king, is to write an open letter where hopefully this rumor now is not a rumor just outside of Jerusalem, but now is a rumor inside Jerusalem and will cause fear. Whether or not this is the right move or the right tactic, again, I think is up to judgment on where you sit. So what is Nehemiah going to do? Nehemiah says, it's a lie. There's no truth in any part of your story. You are making up the whole thing. And then he says, they were just trying to intimidate us, imagining us that they could discourage us and stop the work. So I continued the work with even greater determination. Nehemiah ignores the rumor, and once again, almost like a madman, is so committed to the wall that nothing else, no one else will stop it or will get in the way, despite the harm that could come from it. And there is a lot of harm that could come from this line, from this rumor to Nehemiah. But rather than address it, he just says, it's a lie. and they're just trying to intimidate us, imagining that you can stop us from the wall. Nehemiah does not take it as an opportunity for him to build a bridge. Doesn't use it as an opportunity to say, no, you're wrong. I'm still going to keep building the wall, but this is the reason for the wall. He just sets it aside as crazy talk and then uses it as leverage to continue to proclaim to the people that everybody is against this, so it must be right. Just because everybody is against something doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. That's the word, isn't it? Until tomorrow, happy reading.